Okay, so here's just a list of some terms that we thought some of our friends and family and other people who might subscribe to this channel might need to find. So first word that I have listed on here is actually enthusiast. Now Brady, what would you categorize as an enthusiast?
I would say an enthusiast is a person who is very invested in roller coaster culture.
That's very, very good, very good. I think you could probably even take it a step further and say an enthusiast is the type of ridiculous person who would know all of the silly and nerdy minutia that's about to follow when we define all these words. So the next term we have listed here is credit. You'll hear us say that a lot. Brady, how would you define a credit as a roller coaster enthusiast?
A credit is a tally of each roller coaster that an enthusiast has ridden.
That's correct. That's correct. That's why you'll hear us say anytime someone or one of us rides a new coaster for the first time, that is considered a new credit. Okay, the next term we have, if there is an enthusiast, its opposite is GP. So now Brady, what does GP stand for?
It stands for general public.
That's right, and in the enthusiast community, it's used to differentiate between a true coaster enthusiast and someone who just likes rides and parks and coasters.
Unfortunately, in the enthusiast community, the word GP is often used to be dismissive of non-enthusiasts.
And we will not hear that on this channel, will we, Brad?
No, absolutely not.
Hey, parks are for everyone. No gatekeeping done here. I think a lot of coaster enthusiasts should think of that. Okay, now to break down different types of coasters, of which there are a lot. First, you can break them down by the material used. Brady, what three types of materials will you see used for coasters?
There is a steel coaster made out of steel, a wooden coaster made out of wood, and a hybrid coaster which is made of both steel and wood.
Okay, next we'd like to define the different coasters by design, whether that's track design or train design. The first one would of course be a sit-down coaster, which is just like it sounds. Most coasters you've probably ever ridden in your life were sit-down coasters. You sit down in a cart on the track and ride your coaster. What would be the next kind, Brady?
The next kind would be an inverted coaster.
Okay, what makes an inverted coaster different?
Instead of being on top of the track, you're hanging from below the track.
Okay, and yeah, the track is above your head. Your seat is basically the same as it would be in a cart, only your feet are dangling because you're actually hanging from the track. Next up would be a floorless coaster, which is pretty basic. It's a sit-down coaster, but the only difference is the seats are positioned in a way that your feet are kind of hanging out over instead of on the floor of a actual cart itself. So it has a little bit of what a sit-down coaster has while also having a little bit of what an inverted coaster has. And what's next, Brady?
Next would be a wing coaster.
And what makes a wing coaster unique?
Instead of being on top of the track like most coasters, you're hanging off of a side of the track or one of the wings of the track.
That's right. Wing is a very apt term. Okay, so the next model would be a stand-up coaster. Brady, what's a stand-up coaster?
A stand-up coaster is like a sit-down coaster and a floorless coaster in that you are on top of the track, but instead of sitting down, you're standing up.
If you can believe it. Yes, that is indeed the case. The next model we have is a dive coaster. Now, a dive coaster has unique trains, very much like a floorless train in that your feet are dangling, but even though your ride is on top of the track. What makes a dive coaster is that when it pulls you up to the top of the hill and gets ready to send you down that first steep drop, it actually will grab the cart and hold it there while you look down over the edge for usually 2 to 3 seconds before it drops you. The next model would be a flying coaster. Brady, what makes a flying coaster a flying coaster?
Flying coaster, it's similar to an inverted coaster because you are below the track, but it puts you into a flying position with your head forward and you're laying down pretty much on your stomach while you ride.
Okay, last two we have here, we have a mine train. Now, a mine train coaster, it really is basically a sit-down coaster. The only real difference is the cart. It looks kind of like what you would think of a mine train, like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. That kind of runaway mine train, as they call it here. But for our purposes, it's really not all that different from a sit-down coaster. Then lastly, here we have a suspended coaster. Now, a suspended coaster is very much in the same vein as what, Brady?
An inverted coaster.
That's correct. The only real difference is that instead of sitting in regular coaster seats with those kind of restraints, with a suspended coaster, you're actually suspended from the track sitting in a gondola-style vehicle that swings from side to side. So those are pretty much the important coaster designs that you might hear on our channel. Okay, let's briefly talk about the different ways that a coaster will get its momentum or its propulsion. There are 3 primary methods. Brady, what would the first be?
The first would be a chain lift, which uses a chain to pull the cart up to the top of the lift hill. Next, there is a cable lift, which is pretty much the same as a chain lift, but uses a cable to pull the cart to the top of the lift hill.
Okay, and how about those coasters that don't have a cable or a chain? What do?
They use a launch, which is a method of propulsion to push the cart at the designer's chosen speed up to the top of the hill.
Yes, and speaking of launches, launches are big thing in coasters now. They're becoming more and more prevalent. You're getting launches, multi-launches, forward and backward launches, all different kinds. But you will hear us every once in a while refer to the 4 different types of launches that primarily are used. Brady, what are those 4 types of launches?
First, there's a compressed air launch, which, as it sounds, uses compressed air to launch the train. Next, there is a hydraulic launch, which uses a system of hydraulic motors to launch the train. Finally, there is LSM and LIM launches, which are based off of magnets.
Okay, now when you break down coasters by their size or intended audience, I guess is another way to say it, we have kind of 5 primary categories. Brady, what would they be?
The first one would be a kiddie coaster, which is designed for kids to ride their first actual roller coasters. Next would be a family coaster.
And yeah, in a family coaster, it's just like it sounds. Parents and kids can ride together. Also, it's a nice in-between coaster for the kids who are a little bigger, but not quite ready for the big dogs just yet. And when we talk about big dogs, we move up to like 200 footers, Brady. And what would a 200-foot tall coaster be called?
That would be called a hypercoaster.
That's right. And once you get up to 300 feet, what do we call a 300-foot coaster?
We call that a Giga Coaster.
And finally, 400 feet tall. What's a 400-foot coaster?
That is a strata coaster.
And how many of those are there in the United States?
Just 2.